I took my late father's watch for repair, but the watchmaker found a listening device inside that saved my life. 2 days before my 50th birthday, the secure line on my mahogany desk rang. It was a harsh, mechanical trill that cut through the silence of my private study like a jagged knife. Before I tell you how answering that phone uncovered a murder plot that was slowly killing me, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. It really helps me to create more videos like this and share these crazy stories with you. Trust me, you are going to want to see how this one ends. That phone line wasn't a sound I heard often. The heavy, encrypted analog device sat on the far right corner of my desk, usually gathering dust. It didn't ring for sales calls. It didn't ring for business offers. It didn't even ring for my wife. That line existed for exactly 3 people: my personal broker in Zurich, my primary care physician, and the man who kept the only thing I truly cared about in working order. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. The sky outside my penthouse office was a bruised purple, the kind of weather that makes the city look like it's weeping. I was staring at the rain, trying to stop my left hand from trembling. The tremors had been getting worse. Subtly at first, a coffee cup rattling against a saucer, a signature looking a bit jagged, but now, 6 months later, I had to sit on my hand during board meetings just to keep up appearances. When the phone trilled, I jumped, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the receiver. "Vance here." "Mr. Vance?" It was Mr. Henderson, my watchmaker for 30 years, a man of infinite patience, a man who smelled of cedar dust, Swiss oil, and old paper, a man who viewed punctuality not as a courtesy, but as a moral imperative. In 3 decades, I had never heard him raise his voice, I had never heard him stutter, but today, his silence spoke louder than any scream. He didn't say, "Hello." He didn't ask about the weather, or the upcoming gala, or my health. He didn't use the polite, deferential tone he had perfected over a lifetime of service to the city's elite. He whispered 5 words that froze the blood in my veins, turning the marrow to ice. "Sir, do not tell your wife." I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning the color of bleached bone. The leather of my high-back chair creaked a sound that suddenly seemed deafening, like a gunshot in a library. "Henderson." My voice felt foreign, raspy. The fog in my brain, that damn brain fog that the doctors said was early-onset neurodegeneration, momentarily cleared, sharpened by pure adrenaline. "Is the Patek broken?" "That watch has been in my family for 70 years. My father died wearing it. Henderson, if you've cracked the porcelain dial." "No, sir," he stammered. I could hear the terror in his breath, the shallow rattle of a man who had seen something he wasn't meant to see. This was a man who worked with tweezers and loops, a man of steady hands. Today, he sounded like he was vibrating. I opened the case back to oil the gears. I removed the dust cover to check the serial number against the archives, just as you asked, Mr. Vance. "Someone has removed the resonance chamber." He paused, and the silence stretched until it screamed. I could hear a clock ticking in the background of his shop. Tick, tick, tick. "They replaced it with a microphone," he whispered. "It's high grade, military specification, active suppression technology, and judging by the corrosion on the battery, it's been recording you for at least 6 months. I dropped the phone. The receiver clattered against the rich mahogany wood, bouncing once before dangling by its cord, swaying like a hanged man. The room didn't just spin, it tilted on its axis. The sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt cold, artificial. 6 months. That was exactly when the tremors started. That was when I began forgetting the names of clients I'd known for decades, stumbling over words in board meetings. That was when the doctors recommended by her told me it was stress, then burnout, and finally, a progressive neurological decline. They advised me to get my affairs in order. They gave me pills. They gave me pity. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I had to get to Henderson, but I couldn't just walk out. If they were listening, if there were bugs in the watch, were there bugs in the office, in the car, in the house? I picked up the dangling phone and forced my voice to be calm, though my chest was heaving. "Henderson, I think the line went dead. I'm coming down. If the mainspring is snapped, we'll just have to source a new one. Don't worry. I'll see you in 40 minutes. I hung up. I stared at the intercom on my desk. I pressed the button for my secretary. "Margaret, I'm going to a site inspection at the docks, the West Harbor project. Cancel my afternoon. I don't want to be disturbed. Yes, Mr. Vance, she replied efficiently. Should I call your driver? No, I said, too quickly. No, I need to clear my head. I'll drive myself. I took the private elevator, the one hidden behind the bookcase that only I had the code for. It descended silently to the sub-basement garage. The air down here was cool and smelled of gasoline and concrete. I walked past the row of pristine vehicles, the Mercedes S-Class, the Range Rover. The driver, a man named Carl who had been with me for 5 years, was waxing the limousine at the far end. I watched him for a moment. Was he in on it? Was he the one who planted the bug? I couldn't trust him. I couldn't trust anyone. I walked to the far corner, under the gray canvas tarp. I pulled the cover off my 1964 Aston Martin DB5. It was my father's car. It hadn't been driven in a year. It was analog. No GPS. No Bluetooth. No onboard computer that could be hacked. Just steel, leather, and combustion. I prayed it would start. I turned the key. The engine coughed once, then roared to life, a guttural growl of British engineering that echoed off the concrete walls. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the gear stick into first. I drove out of the garage and into the city. The rain was coming down in sheets now. The wipers slashed back and forth like metronomes counting down the remaining hours of my life. Swish-click, swish-click. I drove to the old quarter. It was the part of the city time had forgotten, a maze of cobblestone streets and narrow alleys where the buildings leaned in toward each other like conspirators. Every time I hit a red light, I checked my rearview mirror. Was that black sedan following me? Was the motorcycle lingering too long in my blind spot? Paranoia is a funny thing. When you're rich, people call it eccentricity, but when you find a bug in your most personal possession, paranoia becomes a survival instinct. It sharpens your senses. I noticed the license plates of the cars behind me. I noticed the rhythm of the traffic lights. I was waking up from a 6-month fog, the adrenaline burning through the haze of whatever drugs they had been feeding me. I parked 3 blocks away in a grimy alley behind a bakery, far from where anyone would expect to see an Aston Martin. I pulled my trench coat tight, turned up the collar, and pulled my hat down low. I walked the rest of the way, the rain soaking into my cashmere coat, chilling me to the bone. I found the shop, Henderson Horology, a modest storefront with gold lettering peeling off the glass. I knocked on the steel door. 3 rapid knocks, 1 slow, the old code we had established years ago for after-hours drop-offs. The lock tumbled, the door cracked open, and a hand pulled me inside. Henderson locked the steel-reinforced door behind me instantly, throwing the deadbolt with a clack that sounded like a judgment. The shop was warm. It smelled of cedar, clock oil, and strong coffee, a smell that usually calmed me. Today, it smelled like a tomb. Henderson looked older than I remembered. His face was pale, his eyes wide behind his thick spectacles. He was wiping his hands on a rag, over and over again. "Mr. Vance," he breathed. I didn't know what to do. I almost called the police, but "You did the right thing calling me first," I said, stripping off my wet coat. "Show me." He led me to the workbench under the intense white light of the magnifying lamp. There it was. My father's 1952 Patek Philippe reference 1518, the holy grail of watches, a perpetual calendar chronograph in yellow gold. It was worth more than the building we were standing in. It was the watch my father had given me when I turned 18. He had told me, "Arthur, this watch doesn't just tell time, it tells history. Don't let anyone rewrite yours." The gold backing was off. The gears were exposed, beautiful and precise, a city of gold and ruby working in perfect harmony. But sitting right on top of the balance wheel, parasitic and ugly, was a black lump of circuitry that looked like a tumor. "It activates on voice frequency," Henderson said, his voice trembling as he handed me a pair of tweezers. "It doesn't broadcast constantly. That would drain the battery and create interference you might hear on speakers. It records, compresses, and uploads via cellular burst transmission every night at 3 a.m. It uses the watch case itself as an antenna," I realized, looking at the wiring. "That's sophisticated. That's not something you buy at a spy shop. That's custom." "I blocked the signal with a Faraday cage," Henderson said, pointing to a copper mesh box on the counter. "I extracted the data file. It has a timestamp log. It's been active for 184 days. 184 days. 6 months. Mr. Vance, are you sure you want to hear this? Henderson asked, his hand hovering over the mouse of his computer. I looked at the waveform on the screen. It was a jagged line of peaks and valleys. My life, reduced to digital noise. Play it, I said. Play the most recent file. Henderson pressed a button. Static filled the small shop. Then, the sound of running water. Then, my wife's voice, Elena. The woman I had pulled out of debt 15 years ago. The woman I had taken to Paris, to Milan, to Tokyo. The woman who swore to love me in sickness and in health. The woman who, just this morning, had kissed my forehead and told me to be careful on the stairs because my balance was off. He's in the shower. The water is running. We can talk. Her voice wasn't the sweet, concerned melodic tone she used when she fed me soup in bed. This voice was cold, surgical. It was the voice of a predator assessing a wounded gazelle. Then, a man's voice. Deep, confident, smooth. My knees nearly buckled. I had to grab the edge of the workbench to keep from falling. Julian, my godson, my general counsel, the man I raised after his parents died in a plane crash when he was 12. I paid for his prep school. I paid for Harvard Law. I gave him the corner office. I treated him better than a son. I trusted him with my life. Is he signing the Living Trust Amendment tonight? Julian asked on the recording. He promised, Elena said. I could hear the clink of glass. She was pouring a drink. He thinks he's losing his mind, Julian. The mercury is working better than we thought. He's shaking like a leaf. He dropped his coffee cup this morning and cried. It was pathetic. Pathetic. That single word hit me harder than any physical blow. I had cried that morning because I felt my mind slipping away. I had cried because I was scared, and she had watched me and felt nothing but contempt. Good, Julian laughed. It was a dark, guttural sound I had never heard him make in public. Keep the dosage up, but be careful. If he dies too fast, the autopsy might pick it up. We need him to decline naturally. Renal failure or dementia. The heavy metals need to settle in the organs. I know what I'm doing, Elena snapped. I'm putting it in the scotch. The bitterness masks the metallic taste. By Christmas, his kidneys will fail or he'll be a vegetable. I get the liquid assets. You get the company control. And Arthur just dies. I felt like I'd been shot in the chest with a hollow point bullet. The air left my lungs. They weren't just waiting for nature to take its course. They were actively, methodically poisoning me. The shakes. The metallic taste in my mouth I thought was a side effect of the medication they gave me. The mood swings. The brain fog. It wasn't dementia. It was mercury poisoning. Heavy metal toxicity. I have to ask you a serious question, and I want you to really think about it. If you heard your spouse and your best friend, the two people you trusted, more than life itself, planning your slow, painful murder on a tape recording, what would you do in that exact second? Would you scream? Would you call 911? Would you run away and never look back? Let me know in the comments below. What is your first instinct? Fight or flight? I didn't run. I didn't scream. The Arthur Vance who walked into that shop, the benevolent, tired, sick philanthropist, died right there among the ticking clocks. A new man was born in the silence that followed that recording. A man who didn't want justice. Justice is for the courts. Justice is slow. Justice involves plea deals and good behavior. I wanted wrath. Put the watch back together, I told Henderson. My voice was no longer shaking. It was dead calm, a flat line. He looked at me like I was insane. Sir, the bug is still inside. It will record everything. If you wear it, I know. Leave it. Let them think I'm still listening. Let them think they've won. If you remove it, the signal stops, and they'll know I found it. They'll run, or they'll try to kill me faster. A car accident. A fall down the stairs. I pulled out my checkbook. My hand wavered, the mercury still wreaking havoc on my nerves, but I forced the pen to move through sheer force of will. I wrote a check for an amount that made Henderson gasp. I'm going to throw a birthday party on Saturday, I said, tearing the check out. The gala of the decade. And you, my old friend, are going to help me deliver the entertainment. I need you to hook this receiver up to a playback system that can interface with the ballroom's audio. I can try, sir, but it's dangerous. If they find out, life is dangerous, Henderson. Take the money. Buy the building. but right now I need a soldier, not a watchmaker. I buttoned my coat. I put the hat back on. I took the watch, the bugged watch, the traitor on my wrist and strapped it on. It felt heavy. It felt like a shackle. "Mr. Vance," Henderson said as I reached the door, "be careful. Mercury. It affects the mind. Don't let them goad you into breaking character." "Don't worry," I said, opening the door into the pouring rain. "I'm a good actor. I've been pretending to be happy for years." I drove home. That drive was the hardest thing I've ever done. I had to go back into the snake pit. I had to sleep in the bed next to the woman who was murdering me. I walked inside the mansion. The foyer was grand, marble floors reflecting the crystal chandelier. It felt like a mausoleum. Elena was in the drawing room, reading a fashion magazine. She looked up with that fake, radiant smile that I used to think was the sun itself. She was wearing a silk robe I had bought her in Milan. "Arthur, you're home early. Did you get the watch fixed?" I looked at her. I looked at the hands that had rubbed my back, the hands that were now poisoning my drink. "No," I lied, deliberately faking a violent tremor in my left hand. I hid it behind my back, acting ashamed. "It needs parts. From Switzerland. The mainspring is shattered. It will take weeks." "Oh, poor baby," she cooed, standing up and walking over to me. She stroked my cheek. Her skin felt like ice. Her perfume, usually intoxicating, now smelled like formaldehyde. "You look exhausted. Let me make you a drink. It will help with the shakes. Julian is coming over later to help with the paperwork." "A drink," I repeated. "Yes, that sounds perfect." I watched Elena pour the scotch. It was a macabre ballet. She moved with the grace of a dancer, her silk robe whispering against her skin as she reached for the crystal decanter. The amber liquid swirled into the heavy glass, catching the low light of the drawing room lamps. To anyone else, it looked like a loving wife preparing a nightcap for her tired husband. To me, it looked like an execution. I saw her body block the view for a fraction of a second, a practiced, fluid motion she must have rehearsed 100 times in the mirror. Her left hand, hidden from the direct line of sight, flickered over the glass. There was no sound, no clink of a vial hitting the rim, just a smooth tilt of the wrist, a few drops of death mixing with the 25-year-old single malt, and then she turned back to me. Her smile was dazzling. It was the smile that had charmed investors, disarmed rivals, and, I now realized, blinded me for 15 years. "Here, darling," she said, her voice dripping with synthetic honey. "Drink up. It'll make the pain go away. It will help you sleep." I took the heavy crystal glass. It felt cold in my hand, sweating slightly. I held it up to the light, staring at the liquid. Somewhere in that suspension of alcohol and water were molecules of mercury, tasteless, odorless, and devastating. I looked her dead in the eye. I searched for a crack in the porcelain mask. I searched for a flicker of hesitation, a glimmer of guilt, anything that would tell me the woman I married was still in there somewhere. There was nothing, just a flat, predatory patience. She was watching my throat, waiting for me to swallow. "Thank you, Elena," I said, my voice cracking. I let the tremor in my hand rattle the ice cubes against the glass. "You take such good care of me. I don't know what I'd do without you." She sat on the arm of my chair, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You'd be lost, Arthur. But I'm here. I'm always here." I brought the glass to my lips. The smell of the peat and oak filled my nose. My body screamed at me to throw it across the room. My instincts roared to smash the glass into the fireplace and strangle the life out of her right there on the Persian rug. But the watch on my wrist felt heavy. Tick, tick, tick. It was a reminder. Patience. Wrath requires patience. I tilted the glass. I let the liquid touch my lips, burning slightly, but I kept my teeth clenched shut. I made a swallowing motion with my throat, a trick I had learned in college to avoid drinking cheap beer at frat parties. "Smooth," I rasped, lowering the glass. "Drink it all," she urged softly. "Doctor's orders." "In a moment," I said. I left my reading glasses in the study. "My head, the fog is so thick tonight." "I'll get them for you," she offered, starting to rise. "No," I snapped, too loudly. I caught myself, feigning a wince of pain. "No, please. The movement helps me. I need to walk. Just give me a second." She settled back, watching me like a hawk. "Okay, but don't take too long. Julian is coming in 20 minutes. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of damp sand. I walked toward the window, the glass of scotch still in my hand. Outside, the rain was lashing against the pane, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon and gray. "Look at that rain," I muttered, turning my back to her. In the reflection of the dark window, I watched her. She had picked up her magazine again, glancing down for just a second. That was all I needed. I poured the contents of the glass into the large potted fiddle-leaf fig that stood in the corner. The soil, dry and thirsty, drank the poisoned scotch instantly. I brought the empty glass back to my chest, turning around with a sigh. "Better?" she asked, looking up. "Much," I lied. I placed the empty glass on the coaster. "I feel warmer already." The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I have ever experienced. It was a cold, black fire. I had to suppress the urge to scream until my throat bled. "I have to ask you, could you do it? Could you look the person poisoning you in the eye, smile, and thank them for the drink? Or would you snap right there? Would the betrayal be too much to handle? Be honest in the comments. I read every single one." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Julian. He strode into the room with the confidence of a man who already owned the place. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit, the kind I used to pay for. He looked healthy, vibrant, and sharp, a stark contrast to the frail, trembling figure I was presenting. "Arthur," he boomed, extending a hand. "Good to see you, old man. How are the tremors today?" I let my hand shake violently as I took his. His grip was firm, condescending. He squeezed a little too hard, testing my weakness. "Not good, Julian," I mumbled, slumping back into my chair. "The doctors say the decline is accelerating." "Tragic," Julian said, though his eyes were dancing. He sat opposite me, pulling a leather folder from his briefcase. He didn't even look at Elena, but the energy between them was palpable. It was the electric current of shared guilt and shared greed. "We need to handle some housekeeping, Arthur," Julian said, opening the folder. He uncapped a Mont Blanc pen, a pen I had given him for his graduation from Harvard Law. "The board is getting nervous. They need assurance that the company is in stable hands while you recover." He slid a document across the low table. The Revocable Living Trust Amendment. I knew what it was. I didn't need to read it. It transferred immediate power of attorney to Julian and named Elena as the sole beneficiary of the liquid assets in the event of my incapacitation. "Sign here," Julian whispered, leaning in. "Just a signature. Then you can go sleep." "You look so tired, Arthur. Let us carry the burden for you." I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes, partly from the act, partly from the stress. This was it. If I signed this, they won. They could commit me to a facility the next day. They could pull the plug on my life support whenever they chose. I took the pen. I brought the tip to the paper. Elena leaned forward, her breath held. Julian stopped breathing. I let the pen hover. Then, I let it slip from my fingers. It rolled across the document, leaving a stray ink mark. I can't," I stammered. "My hand. It won't do what I tell it." "Try again," Julian said, his voice tightening. He picked up the pen and jammed it back into my hand. "Grip it hard, Arthur. Just an X will do. I can witness it." "No," I said, pushing the paper away. "Not tonight. I'm too weak. I don't want to ruin the document." "Arthur, this is urgent," Julian snapped. The mask slipped for a second. His tone was sharp, aggressive. "Don't yell at me," I cried out, shrinking back into the chair like a frightened child. My father wouldn't want me to sign sloppy work." Elena intervened, placing a hand on Julian's arm. "Julian, stop. You're scaring him. The stress will make him have a stroke before he signs." She turned to me, her voice softening. "Baby, it's okay. You can sign it later, when you feel strong." "Saturday," I whispered. "The birthday party. I'll be strong for the party, I promise. We can do it before the speeches. A ceremonial signing, in front of the guests. That would be dignified." Julian and Elena exchanged a look. I could see the gears turning. A public signing? It was risky, but it also legitimized the transfer of power. If I signed it in front of 200 witnesses, no one could contest it later. No one could claim I was coerced in a dark room. "That's a brilliant idea, Arthur," Julian said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "A passing of the torch. We'll set it up on stage." "Yes," I said, closing my eyes. "On stage, So everyone can see. So everyone can see. They left an hour later. Julian kissed Elena on the cheek a little too lingeringly and patted my shoulder like I was a dying dog. As soon as the front door closed, I stood up. I walked to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower, blasting the water to create white noise. Then, I leaned over the sink and dry heaved until my ribs ached. The stress, the anger, the sheer physical toll of being in the same room with them was destroying me. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was gray. My eyes were sunken. The mercury was real. It wasn't just an act. I was dying. Not yet, I hissed at my reflection. You don't get to die yet. The next morning, I initiated the second phase of my plan. I told Elena I was going to the park to feed the ducks, a senile, harmless activity. She let me go, probably happy to have the house to herself to call Julian. I drove the Aston Martin to a nondescript medical park in the suburbs, 3 towns over. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. I paid cash. I need a full heavy metal toxicology panel, I told the lab technician. Stat. We usually require a doctor's referral, she said. I slid $500 across the counter. I'm a paranoid writer doing research. Just take the blood. She took the blood, and a hair sample. I waited in the car. 4 hours later, the results were emailed to a burner phone I had bought at a gas station. Mercury, blood, 85 mcg, L normal range is less than 10. Mercury, 120 mg/L. Diagnosis: critical toxicity. I stared at the screen. 85. They weren't just poisoning me, they were marinating me. If I hadn't found the watch, I would have been dead by Christmas, just as they planned. My next call was to Agent Miller. Miller was an FBI agent I had worked with 5 years ago when my company discovered a massive embezzlement scheme in our logistics division. He was a straight arrow, a man who hated white-collar crime with a religious fervor. We met in a diner near the interstate. It was cliché, but effective. No one we knew would be caught dead eating greasy spoon eggs at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. I slid the burner phone across the table, the toxicology report open. I placed the USB drive Henderson had given me next to it. "What is this, Arthur?" Miller asked, wiping grease from his mouth. "Proof of attempted murder," I said, "and conspiracy to commit fraud." Miller listened to the recording on headphones. His face went hard. He didn't blink. When he took the headphones off, he looked at me differently. "This is your wife? And your lawyer?" "Yes. We can pick them up now," Miller said, reaching for his jacket. "We have probable cause. With the tox report, we can get a warrant for the house to find the poison." "No," I said, grabbing his wrist. "Not yet, Arthur. You're walking around with a lethal dose of heavy metal in your veins. You need a hospital, not a vendetta." "I've started chelation therapy in secret," I lied. "I'm taking binders. I can hold on for 3 more days." "Why? Why wait?" "Because if you arrest them now, they'll lawyer up. They'll claim I was suicidal and took the poison myself. They'll claim the recording is out of context or doctored. Julian is one of the best defense attorneys in the state. He'll spin this." I leaned in close. "I need a confession, or something close to it. I need to destroy their credibility so thoroughly that no jury in the world will doubt their guilt." "And how do you plan to do that?" "My birthday party. Saturday night. I'm going to play the recording for the entire room. I want you there. When they panic, when they try to run, that's when you take them." Miller stared at me for a long time. He saw the desperation in my eyes, but he also saw the resolve. "Saturday," he said finally. "We'll have a team in the kitchen disguised as catering staff. But Arthur, if you die on that stage, I'm going to be very pissed off." "I won't die," I said. "I'm too angry to die." The next 2 days were a blur of psychological warfare. I had to play the part of the dying man perfectly. I spent hours in bed, staring at the ceiling. I let Elena feed me soup. I let her stroke my hair while she texted Julian with her other hand. I talked to the watch, knowing the bug was still active, knowing they were listening to the recordings every morning. I fed them disinformation. "Oh God," I would whisper to myself in the empty room. "I'm so weak. I don't think I can make it to the new year. I just want to sign the papers and rest. I trust Julian. He's a good boy." I heard them discussing it on the recordings Henderson intercepted. "He's ready to fold," Julian said on Friday's tape. "He's practically begging to sign. We might not even need the gala." No, Elena insisted. The gala is perfect. It's his final public appearance. It explains why he steps down afterward. It's the perfect cover story. They were digging their own graves, one sentence at a time. Saturday arrived. The morning of my 50th birthday, the day I was supposed to celebrate half a century of life. I was preparing to end the lives of the people I loved. I woke up with a headache that felt like a drill boring into my temples. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't button my shirt. Henderson arrived at the mansion at 10 a.m., ostensibly to deliver the repaired watch for the party. He met me in the library. He looked terrified. "Is it set?" I asked, closing the doors. "Yes, sir," Henderson whispered. "I spoke to the AV technician for the hotel ballroom. I bribed him $5,000 to let me set up a special tribute audio feed. He thinks it's a surprise message from your late father." "It is a surprise," I said grimly, "just not from my father. The receiver is hooked directly into the main mixing board," Henderson explained. "I have the remote. Button A plays the slideshow. Button B overrides the audio channel with the feed from the USB drive. Button C. Well, Button C is the live feed from the watch itself." "Live?" I asked. "Yes. The bug transmits in bursts, but I can force a continuous open channel for a few minutes before the battery dies. If they say anything on stage, the room will hear it." "Good," I said. "Give me the remote." I pocketed the small device. It weighed nothing, yet it felt heavier than the world. The evening came. The limousine was waiting. Elena descended the staircase in a red dress. It was blood red, strapless, and cost more than most people earned in a year. She looked breathtaking. She looked like the devil's favorite concubine. "Happy birthday, darling," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "Thank you, Elena," I said, offering her my arm. "Shall we go?" "Let's go make history," she smiled. We arrived at the Grand Hotel. The paparazzi were there, flashing bulbs popping like strobe lights. I played the part, leaning heavily on my cane, squinting against the glare. Inside, the ballroom was magnificent. 200 guests, the elite of the city, senators, judges, tech moguls, people I had done business with for decades. They all looked at me with that specific mix of pity and hunger that predators have for the wounded alpha. Julian was already there, holding court near the bar. He saw us and raised a glass. I made my rounds, shaking hands, accepting condolences on my failing health. "Just a rough patch," I told the senator. "I'm sure I'll bounce back." "Of course, Arthur, of course," he lied. Dinner was served. I didn't eat. I couldn't risk it. I drank only water from a bottle I had opened myself. Finally, the moment arrived. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Julian walked up to the microphone. The crowd applauded. He looked handsome, authoritative, the perfect air. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice smooth as silk, "we are gathered here to celebrate a man who is a pillar of this city, a mentor, a father figure to me, Arthur Vance." Applause. I sat at the head table, freezing. "Arthur has built an empire," Julian continued, "but even titans need rest. Arthur has decided that tonight, on his 50th birthday, he will be taking a step back to focus on his health." He gestured to me. "Arthur, please, come join me." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but this time, it wasn't an act. The adrenaline was warring with the poison. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Julian put an arm around my shoulder, and to ensure that his legacy is protected, Arthur has asked to sign the transition documents here, tonight, with all of you as his witnesses. He pulled the trust amendment from the podium. A waiter brought out a small table and a pen. "Sign here, Arthur," Julian whispered, off mic. "Then it's all over." I looked at the crowd. I saw Elena in the front row, her eyes gleaming. I looked at Agent Miller, standing in the back near the kitchen doors, dressed as a waiter. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I looked at the pen. I reached into my pocket and touched the remote. "You know," I said, leaning into the microphone, "my father gave me a watch when I was 18. Julian stiffened. "This wasn't in the script. He told me to watch out for the people who try to steal my time," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "He said time is the only thing you can't buy back." I turned to Julian. I looked him in the eyes. I saw the confusion starting to dawn. "I took that watch for repair on Thursday, Julian. The watchmaker found something interesting." "Arthur, stick to the speech," Julian hissed through his teeth, his smile fixed for the crowd. He found a listening device, I said loudly. The crowd murmured. The sound was like a wave crashing. Arthur, you're having an episode, Julian said loudly, grabbing my arm. Let's get you off stage. I am not having an episode, I roared, ripping my arm away. I am having a revelation. I pulled the remote out. I prepared a slideshow, I said to the confused crowd, but I think you'd all prefer to hear the truth. I pressed the button. The massive LED screen behind me, which had been displaying a polite, looped slideshow of the company logo, suddenly flickered. It went black for a heartbeat, drawing every eye in the room. Then, a jagged, neon blue audio waveform cut across the darkness. Static hissed through the concert-grade speakers, a harsh, scratching sound that made the guests in the front row wince. Then, the voice. It wasn't a whisper, it was a thunderclap. The mercury is working. He'll be a vegetable by Christmas. Elena's voice filled the ballroom. It bounced off the crystal chandeliers and the marble walls. It was undeniable. It was the voice of the hostess, the loving wife, the woman in the red dress sitting 10 feet away from me. The room went silent, not the polite silence of a listening crowd, but the vacuum of shock. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A glass shattered somewhere near the bar, the sound impossibly loud in the void. On the screen, the waveform spiked again. Julian's voice. And Arthur? Elena. Arthur will be drooling in a nursing home until he finally dies, and we'll be on the yacht. I've already picked out the colors for the master stateroom. I watched Elena. She had turned to stone. Her face, so carefully composed moments ago, was slack with horror. The blood had drained from her skin, leaving her looking like a wax doll in a couture gown. Julian, however, was a fighter. He was a shark, and sharks bite when they are cornered. He lunged for the microphone, his hand clamping over the top of it. "Cut the feed," he screamed at the sound booth. "Cut it now. This is a technical malfunction. This is a deep fake." He turned to the crowd, his smile manic, sweat already beading on his forehead. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, Arthur has been experimenting with AI technology. This is a sick joke, a symptom of his condition. He's not in his right mind." I stood there, leaning on my cane, watching him unravel. "It's not AI, Julian," I said, my voice calm without the microphone. "Shut up, old man," he hissed, leaning in close to me, his back to the audience. He gripped my shoulder, his fingers digging into my suit jacket. "You think this proves anything? It's inadmissible. I'll have you declared incompetent by morning. I'll have you locked in a psych ward so deep you'll never see the sun again." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn in months. "You really should have checked the watch, Julian." "What?" he snapped. "The watch," I said, lifting my left wrist. "Henderson set it up. Button C." I pressed the third button on the remote in my pocket. The speakers screeched with a burst of feedback, then settled into a low hum. I should have doubled the dose. Julian's voice boomed through the room. The crowd gasped. Julian froze. He hadn't said that on the recording. He had just whispered it to me, right now, on stage. He looked up at the speakers, then down at my wrist. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The watch was broadcasting live. I didn't," he stammered, backing away from me. "You just confessed." "Julian," I said into the watch. "Live. To 200 witnesses, including the state senator and the chief of police." I looked toward the back of the room. "Agent Miller? I think we're done here." The kitchen doors burst open. "FBI, nobody move." Agent Miller, no longer looking like a waiter, stormed into the room with his weapon drawn, flanked by 5 tactical agents in vests. At the main entrance, local police officers swarmed in, blocking the exits. Pandemonium broke out. The wealthy elite of the city scrambled away from the tables, overturning chairs in their haste to distance themselves from the accused. Julian looked left, then right. The animal instinct took over. He ran. He didn't run toward the exit. He knew it was blocked. He scrambled toward the service corridor behind the stage. He vaulted over the flower arrangements, his expensive Italian shoes slipping on the polished floor. "Stop him!" Miller shouted. Julian made it about 15 feet. He tried to cut through the massive display of the 5-tier birthday cake. He collided with the table at full speed. The crash was spectacular. 5 layers of sponge, buttercream, and fondant came down in an avalanche of sugar. Julian went down with it, buried under a mountain of white frosting. He thrashed, trying to stand, but an agent was on him in seconds, driving a knee into his back. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder," the agent yelled, cuffing his hands behind his back. Julian lifted his head, his face smeared with white icing and blood from a split lip. He spat, screaming obscenities at me, at the agents, at the world. I turned my attention to the front row. Elena hadn't moved. She was still sitting in her chair, staring at the empty stage where her future had just evaporated. 2 officers approached her. "Mrs. Vance, please stand up." She looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with tears. Not tears of remorse, I knew. Tears of self-pity. Tears for the yacht she would never buy. She stood up slowly. She walked to the edge of the stage, her hands trembling. "Arthur," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "Arthur, please, you know me. I love you. He manipulated me. Julian made me do it. I was scared of him." She reached out a hand toward me. The diamond bracelet I had bought her for our 10th anniversary glittered under the stage lights. "Tell them, Arthur. Tell them I'm a victim." I looked down at her. I remembered the soup. I remembered the vitamins she insisted I take. I remembered the cold, dead look in her eyes when she poured the poison into my scotch. I leaned down, just close enough for her to hear me over the chaos. "You aren't a victim, Elena," I said softly. "You're a gold digger who ran out of luck." I straightened up. "Get her out of my sight." The officers took her arms. She screamed as the handcuffs clicked, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "I love you, Arthur. Don't let them take me." I watched them drag her out. She tripped on the hem of her red dress, stumbling, stripped of all her dignity. The room was quiet again, save for the crackle of police radios. I stood alone on the stage. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 3 days suddenly evaporated. The exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. My legs buckled. I had to grab the podium to keep from collapsing. The mercury was still in my blood. I was still sick. I looked out at the stunned crowd. Friends, colleagues, rivals. They were staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. I saw a waiter passing with a tray of champagne that had been abandoned in the chaos. I waved him over. He approached tentatively, his hands shaking. I picked up a glass. It was crisp, clean, and sealed. Safe. I raised it to the room. My hand trembled, but I held it high. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice raspy but clear. "The entertainment is over, but the open bar is paid for until midnight." I took a sip. The party continues. Then, the world went black. I woke up 3 days later in a private room at St. Jude's Hospital. The room was white, sterile, and quiet. There was an IV drip in my arm, pumping a clear fluid into my veins. "Mr. Vance?" I turned my head. It was Agent Miller. He was sitting in the corner, reading a newspaper. "Did we get them?" I croaked. My throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. "We got them," Miller said, putting the paper down. "They're being held without bail. The recording, the toxicology report, the live confession. It's a slam dunk, Arthur. Julian is already trying to cut a deal to testify against Elena. Elena is claiming Julian threatened her life. They're eating each other alive." "Good," I whispered. "You collapsed on stage," Miller said. "Doctors say your kidneys were shutting down. Another week of that dosage, and..." He trailed off. "You cut it close, Arthur. Too close." "I had to be sure," I said. The recovery was hell. Chelation therapy is not a gentle process. It involves injecting agents into your blood that bind to heavy metals and strip them from your tissues. It feels like having the flu, a migraine, and a hangover all at once. I spent a month in that clinic. I lost my hair. I lost 30 pounds. I shook so bad I couldn't feed myself for the first 2 weeks. But every day, the numbers on the chart went down. Mercury, 85, 60, 40, 15. I watched the news from my hospital bed. It was the scandal of the decade. Vance Gala turns into crime scene. Lawyer and socialite charged with attempted murder. I saw the mugshots. Julian looked broken, his arrogance stripped away. Elena looked old, the harsh lighting of the booking photo revealing the cruelty around her mouth that I had chosen to ignore for years. The trial took place 6 months later. I didn't have to testify. The recordings and the medical evidence were enough. Elena was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. Julian got 15 years. The judge added time for his violation of the attorney-client privilege and his position of trust. Some people in the media and even some of my friends said I was too cruel. They said I should have handled it quietly. They said the public humiliation was a step too far, an act of sadism that made me just as bad as them. But others say that when you try to steal a man's life, you forfeit your own dignity. What do you think? Did they deserve the public takedown, or did I go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. When I was finally discharged, the first place I went wasn't home. I couldn't go back to the mansion. It felt tainted. I put it on the market the next day. I drove to the old quarter. The sign on the door of the watch shop was new, Henderson and Sons. I walked in. The bell chimed. Henderson looked up from his workbench. He looked healthy. The terror was gone from his eyes. "Mr. Vance," he smiled. "You look better." "I feel better," I said. "How is the building?" "It's wonderful, sir. The heating works. The roof doesn't leak. My grandson is starting his apprenticeship next week." I had bought the entire building and deeded it to him the day after the arrest. I also set up a trust for his family. He had saved my life. A building was the least I could do. "I have something for you," Henderson said. He reached into the safe and pulled out a velvet box. He opened it. There it was, the 1952 Patek Philippe. It looked brand new. The gold shone. The crystal was flawless. I removed the device, Henderson said gently. I sourced a vintage resonance chamber from a collector in Geneva. I cleaned the movement. I oiled the escapement. It is exactly as your father intended it to be. I took the watch. It was heavy, warm in my hand. I held it to my ear. Tick, tick, tick. No static. No hidden microphones. No betrayal. Just the pure, mechanical heartbeat of time. "Thank you, Henderson," I said, strapping it onto my wrist. "What will you do now, sir?" he asked. Now? I looked out the window at the city. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. Now, I'm going to take a vacation, somewhere with no cell service, somewhere with no lawyers. "And the company?" "I sold it," I said. "This morning. I don't need the stress. I have enough money to last 10 lifetimes." I walked to the door. "Mr. Vance?" Henderson called out. I turned back. "Your father," he said. "He would have been proud of you. You watched out for the people who tried to steal your time." I nodded, a lump in my throat. "Goodbye, Henderson." I walked out onto the street. The air was crisp. I was 50 years old. I was alone. I was scarred, but I was alive. I checked my watch. 2 p.m. I had nowhere to be, and for the first time in my life, that felt like freedom. This is Arthur Vance, signing off.